Hey! Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Alex, and this is English in Fluency, the place where we don't just study English, we actually live inside it for a little while. And today, I've got something really special for you, something a lot of you have been asking me for in the comments for weeks now. You wanted more listening practice, real conversations, real people, real problems, real emotions, spoken at a normal pace, not that slow, robotic textbook voice that makes every conversation sound like it's happening between two tired robots. So, today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to listen to 4 different conversations, all designed for B1 level English learners, which means if you can already understand simple sentences, but you still get a little lost when native speakers talk fast, mix in slang, or trail off in the middle of a sentence, then honestly, you are exactly who this video was made for. Stay right where you are. Before we jump in, let me just say this. Listening is, without a doubt, the hardest skill to build on your own. You can study grammar with a book. You can build vocabulary with flashcards. You can even practice speaking alone in your bedroom, talking to yourself like a crazy person. I know I do that. Don't judge me. But listening needs real voices, real rhythm, real hesitation, real and and you know what I mean. And that's something you can only get by actually listening, again and again, until your brain starts to catch the patterns automatically. So that's the mission today. We're going to walk through 4 conversations together. I'll play a little bit, then I'll pause and explain what just happened, what phrases you should notice, what the emotion behind the words was, because English isn't just words, it's feeling too. And by the end, you're going to have picked up new vocabulary, new expressions, and hopefully a much sharper ear for real spoken English. So grab a coffee or tea, or whatever keeps you going, get comfortable, maybe grab a notebook if you're the type who likes to write things down, and let's get started. Now, before we jump into the first conversation, I want to quickly share a few common mistakes I see B1 learners make when they're trying to improve their listening skills, because avoiding these mistakes can honestly save you months of frustration. The first mistake is trying to understand every single word. I know I already touched on this a little earlier, but it's worth repeating because it's just that important. When you focus too hard on catching every individual word, you actually miss the overall meaning, because your brain gets stuck trying to process one tricky word, while the conversation has already moved on 3 sentences ahead. Instead, train yourself to focus on the general idea first, the emotion, the topic, the relationship between the speakers, and let the smaller details fill in naturally with repeated listening. The second common mistake is only listening to slow, overly clear, textbook-style audio. I understand why people do this. It feels comfortable, it feels manageable, but it doesn't actually prepare you for real conversations, because real people don't talk like textbooks. Real people speak quickly. They connect words together. They drop sounds. They interrupt each other. They trail off mid-sentence sometimes. That's exactly why I try to keep the conversations in these videos sounding as natural and realistic as possible. Because the more your ear gets used to natural speed and rhythm, the less shocking and overwhelming real conversations will feel when you encounter them outside of a learning environment, whether that's watching a show, traveling, or talking with English-speaking friends and co-workers. The third mistake, and this one's sneaky, is passive listening without any active engagement. Just letting English audio play in the background while you're doing something else can be helpful for building general familiarity with the sound of the language, sure, but it's not going to build strong comprehension on its own. That's why today's video is structured the way it is, with pauses, explanations, and speaking practice built directly into the conversations, because active engagement, repeating phrases out loud, answering questions, predicting what might happen next, that's what actually strengthens the neural connections responsible for real listening comprehension. So as we go through today's conversations, really try to participate, even if it feels a little strange talking back to a video. Trust me, your future English-speaking self will thank you. Okay, with all that said, let's finally dive into our first conversation. Our first conversation takes place on a Saturday morning in a small coffee shop near a university campus. The two people talking are Maya and Ben. They're old friends from college who haven't seen each other in a few months, and they've just bumped into each other by accident. Now, before we listen, I want you to think about this for a second. When two friends meet, after a long time, what do they usually say first? Take a guess. Maybe something like, "Oh my gosh, it's been forever," or "Wow, look at you." Keep that in your head, and let's listen. Maya walks into the coffee shop, orders a cappuccino, and turns around to find a table. That's when she sees Ben sitting near the window, scrolling through his phone. She stops for a second, almost like she can't believe it, and then she calls out his name. "Ben? Oh my gosh, is that you?" Ben looks up, a little confused at first, and then his face lights up. "Maya, wait, no way. What are you doing here?" She laughs and walks over to his table. "I could ask you the same thing. I haven't seen you since, what, graduation?" Ben nods slowly, like he's doing the math in his head. "Yeah, that sounds about right. Man, that feels like a lifetime ago." Maya sits down across from him, still smiling, and says, "So, how have you been?" Like, actually been, not the fake "I'm fine" answer. Ben laughs at that, because apparently that's a running joke between them. "Okay, fair. Honestly, it's been a rough couple of months. I switched jobs, moved to a new apartment, and my car broke down twice. Twice, Maya. In the same month." Maya covers her mouth, half laughing, half sympathetic. "Oh no, that's brutal. What happened with the car?" Ben sighs and leans back in his chair. "Long story short, the engine just decided it didn't want to work anymore. Cost me almost all my savings to fix it." Maya shakes her head. "That's the worst. Cars always break down at the worst possible time, don't they?" Ben agrees. "Exactly. It's like they can sense when you have zero extra money, and they just go, 'Okay, now's a good time to die.'" They both laugh at that, and there's this comfortable pause, the kind of pause that only happens between people who really know each other. Let's stop right there for a second. Did you catch all of that? Let's slow it down and pull out a few really useful expressions, because this is where the real learning happens. First, notice how Maya said "no way" when she saw Ben. That's an expression of surprise, very common in spoken English, and it basically means "I can't believe it," or "Really?" You'll hear native speakers say "no way" constantly in casual conversations. Next, Ben said, "That feels like a lifetime ago." which is a really nice way to describe something that happened a long time ago, but it emphasizes how much has changed since then, not just the actual amount of time. Then we have long story short, which Ben used before explaining about his car. This phrase is used when someone wants to summarize something instead of going into every single detail. It's incredibly useful, and you'll hear it in almost every casual conversation about something complicated. Try using it yourself. Think of something that happened to you recently, something a little complicated, and practice saying long story short, followed by a short summary. Go ahead, pause the video if you want, and say it out loud once. I'll wait. Okay, let's continue the conversation. After that comfortable pause, Maya asks, "So, the new job, how's that going? You said you switched, right?" Ben nods and takes a sip of his coffee before answering. "Yeah, I'm working in marketing now, for a small tech company downtown. It's actually pretty good, way better than my old job." Maya raises her eyebrows, clearly interested. "Oh, nice. What made you switch?" Ben thinks for a second before answering. "Honestly, my old boss was impossible to work with. Nothing was ever good enough. You know the type." Maya nods immediately, like she's had experience with exactly that kind of boss before. "Oh, I know exactly the type. I had a boss like that at my last internship. It's exhausting." Ben continues, "Right? Like, I'd finish a project, feel good about it, and then he'd find something to criticize every single time. It got to the point where I just dreaded going to work every morning." Maya says softly, "That sounds really draining." Ben agrees. It was. So when this new opportunity came up, I didn't even think twice. I just took it. Maya smiles and says, "Good for you. Sometimes you just have to make that jump even if it's scary." Ben nods. "Exactly. And honestly, it's been the best decision I've made in a long time." Let's pause again here because there's some really valuable vocabulary in that section. When Ben said his boss was impossible to work with, that's a great phrase to describe a difficult person, someone who's very hard to please or get along with. Then Maya used the word draining, which describes something that makes you feel very tired, physically or emotionally, especially over a long period of time. A draining job, a draining relationship, a draining conversation. These are all common combinations. Another great phrase is, "I didn't even think twice," which Ben used to say he made a decision quickly and confidently, without hesitating. And finally, make that jump, which means to take a risk, to make a big change, even though it might be scary. These are the kinds of natural expressions that don't usually appear in textbooks, but native speakers use them constantly in everyday conversations. Try repeating each of these phrases out loud, just once, to help your mouth get used to the rhythm. Impossible to work with. Draining. I didn't even think twice. Make that jump. Good. Let's keep going. The conversation between Maya and Ben continues a little longer. Maya tells Ben about her own life, how she's been traveling a bit for work, and how she's thinking about going back to school for a master's degree. Ben listens carefully, asking little questions here and there, the kind of questions that show he's genuinely interested, not just being polite. At one point, Maya says, "Honestly, I've been so busy that half the time I don't even know what day it is." Ben laughs and replies, "I feel that. Time just disappears when you're busy, doesn't it?" Maya nods. It really does. 1 minute it's Monday, and then suddenly it's Friday, and you have no idea where the week went. This is another really natural expression worth remembering. I feel that, which is a casual way of agreeing with someone, of saying, I understand exactly what you mean, or I relate to that. You'll hear younger English speakers especially use this phrase a lot in casual conversations. Before they say goodbye, they exchange phone numbers again, because apparently they lost contact somewhere along the way, and they promise to actually meet up properly next time, not just by accident. Maya says, we should really get lunch sometime, not just run into each other every 6 months. Ben laughs. Deal. I'll actually text you this time, I promise. And with that warm, familiar energy between old friends, their conversation comes to an end. Now here's your practice moment for this first conversation. I want you to imagine you're Maya, and you're telling a different friend about running into Ben. Try to summarize what happened using your own words, using at least 2 of the expressions we just learned. No way. Long story short, I feel that, or make that jump. Say it out loud, even if nobody's listening, even if you feel a little silly talking to your phone screen. Trust me, this kind of active practice is what actually builds fluency, way more than just listening passively ever will. All right, let's move to our second conversation. This one is a little more tense, a little more emotional, and it takes place in a completely different setting, an office, during a busy afternoon. The 2 people talking here are Sophia, a project manager, and Daniel, one of her team members. There's been a mistake with a client's project, and Sophia needs to talk to Daniel about it. Now, before we listen, think about this. Workplace conversations about mistakes can be really uncomfortable, right? Nobody likes admitting they messed up, and nobody really enjoys being the one who has to point it out either. Let's see how these 2 handle it. Sophia knocks gently on the open door of Daniel's small office space and says, Hey, Daniel, got a minute? Daniel looks up from his computer, and you can immediately hear a slight tension in his voice, like he already knows this isn't going to be a casual chat. Yeah, sure. What's up? Sophia steps in and closes the door halfway, which is already a small clue that this is a private, maybe serious conversation. So, I just got off the phone with the client and, there's an issue with the report we sent yesterday. Daniel's face changes instantly, a mix of confusion and worry. Oh no, what kind of issue? Sophia takes a breath before continuing. The numbers in the 3rd section don't match what we discussed in the last meeting. The client noticed right away. Daniel closes his eyes for a second, clearly frustrated with himself. Oh man, I think I know what happened. I was using the old spreadsheet instead of the updated one. I completely missed that. Sophia nods, her tone calm but firm. Yeah, that's probably it. Look, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. Mistakes happen. But we do need to fix this today, before end of day if possible. Let's pause here for a second, because there's some really important vocabulary and tone to notice. First, when Sophia says, got a minute? That's a very natural, casual way of asking someone if they have time to talk. Way more common in real conversation than something formal like, may I have a moment of your time? Also notice how Daniel says, what's up? As a casual response, which simply means, what do you want to talk about? Or, what's going on? Then there's the phrase, got off the phone, which Sophia uses to say she just finished a phone call. This is extremely common in daily English, and you'll hear it constantly in office settings. And finally, notice the phrase end of day. which basically means before the workday finishes. You'll often hear it shortened even further to just EOD in emails and messages. Try saying these phrases out loud. Got a minute? What's up? Got off the phone? End of day. These are small phrases, but they appear constantly in real English conversations, especially in professional settings. Let's continue the conversation. Daniel, still looking stressed, says, "Okay, yeah, I'll fix it right now. I'm really sorry about this, Sophia. I should have double-checked before sending it." Sophia softens her tone a bit and responds, "Hey, it's okay, honestly. We're all human, mistakes happen. Just make sure it doesn't happen again, all right?" Daniel nods gratefully, clearly relieved that Sophia isn't being harsh about it. "Yeah, for sure. I'll set a reminder for myself next time to always check I'm using the latest version." Sophia smiles slightly. "Good idea. And hey, if you're ever unsure about something, just ask me before sending it out. I'd rather answer a quick question than deal with an angry client." Daniel laughs a little, the tension in his shoulders visibly relaxing. "Yeah, that's fair. I'll definitely do that from now on." Sophia stands up to leave, but before she does, she adds, "Also, once you fix the numbers, send it to me first so I can double-check, and then we'll send it back to the client together, okay?" Daniel agrees immediately. "Sounds good. Give me like 20 minutes. Sophia nods and heads for the door. "Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. I know it's not fun dealing with mistakes, but I appreciate you taking care of it quickly." Let's pause once more, because this section is full of everyday expressions worth remembering. When Daniel said, "I should have double-checked," that's a great structure to remember. Should have, plus a past participle, used to express regret about something you didn't do. You'll hear this constantly when people talk about mistakes. Sophia's response, "We're all human," is a lovely, gentle expression used to comfort someone after they've made a mistake, basically saying that everyone makes errors sometimes. It's completely normal. Then there's "that's fair," which Daniel uses to agree that what Sophia said makes sense or is reasonable. This phrase is incredibly common in spoken English, especially during discussions or slight disagreements where someone eventually agrees with the other person's point. And finally, "give me like 20 minutes." Notice how the word "like" is used here, not to compare things, but just as a filler word before giving an estimate. Native speakers use "like" this way constantly in casual speech, and once you start noticing it, you'll hear it everywhere. Now, here's your listening and speaking practice for this conversation. Think about a time you made a mistake at work, at school, or even just in daily life. Try explaining it out loud using the structure "I should have," followed by what you wish you had done differently. For example, "I should have checked the address before leaving the house," or "I should have asked for help earlier." Say your sentence out loud, twice, slowly, and clearly. This kind of small speaking practice, connected directly to something you just listened to, is incredibly powerful for building real fluency, way more effective than just memorizing grammar rules in isolation. All right, let's move into our third conversation, and this one, I have to warn you, is a little more emotional. This conversation is between two sisters, Grace and Ellie, and it takes place late at night, in Grace's apartment, over tea. Ellie has been going through a hard time, and she finally opens up to her older sister about it. Before we listen, think about this. When someone you love is struggling, What kind of language do we usually use to comfort them? Gentle words, right? Soft tones, reassurance. Let's listen and notice exactly how that sounds in natural English. Grace pours 2 cups of tea and sits down next to Ellie on the couch. The room is quiet except for the soft sound of rain outside the window. Grace notices that Ellie has been unusually quiet all evening, and finally she gently asks, "Hey, is everything okay? You've been really quiet tonight." Ellie stares down at her cup for a moment before answering, her voice a little shaky. "Yeah, no, not really. I don't know." Grace puts her cup down and turns her body slightly toward her sister, giving her full attention. "Talk to me. What's going on?" Ellie takes a deep breath, and you can hear the emotion building in her voice as she speaks. "I think Mark and I are breaking up. Like, for real this time." Grace's expression softens immediately, full of concern. "Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry. What happened?" Ellie wipes her eyes quickly before continuing. "I don't even know anymore. It feels like we've just been drifting apart for months, and neither of us wants to admit it." Grace reaches over and gently squeezes her sister's hand. "That sounds really painful. I'm really sorry you're going through this." Let's pause here for a moment. This part of the conversation has such a different emotional tone compared to the first two. And that's intentional, because real spoken English changes completely depending on the emotion behind it. Notice how Grace's questions are very gentle. "Is everything okay?" And "talk to me?" These are soft, caring ways of inviting someone to open up without pressuring them. Then Ellie uses the phrase, "for real this time," which adds emphasis, showing that this isn't the first time there's been trouble, but this time it feels final and serious. Also notice the phrase, "drifting apart," a beautiful, gentle way to describe two people slowly growing distant from each other emotionally, without a specific big argument causing it, just a slow, sad separation over time. These are advanced emotional vocabulary pieces that are still totally appropriate and common at the B1 level. So don't worry. You don't need to be an advanced speaker to understand or use them. Let's continue listening. Grace asks softly, "Do you want to talk about what's been happening, or do you just want to sit here for a bit?" Ellie manages a small, tired smile. "Honestly? Both, I think." Grace smiles back gently. "Okay, we can do both." There's a small pause, comfortable despite the sadness in the room, and then Ellie begins explaining. "I think it started a few months ago. We just stopped really talking, you know? Like actually talking, not just about schedules and bills and stuff." Grace nods slowly, listening carefully without interrupting. Ellie continues, "And I kept telling myself it was just a busy phase, that things would go back to normal eventually. But they didn't. If anything, it just got worse." Grace asks gently, "Have you two talked about it? Like, really talked?" Ellie shakes her head. "Not really. Every time I try to bring it up, he just changes the subject, or says he's tired, or that it's not a big deal." Grace sighs sympathetically. "That must be so frustrating, feeling like you're the only one trying." Pause with me here again. Notice the phrase, "just a busy phase," which Ellie uses to describe a temporary difficult period that she hoped would pass on its own. This is a really common way English speakers minimize a problem at first, hoping it will resolve itself. Then there's "changes the subject," a very useful phrase describing when someone avoids a topic, by starting to talk about something else instead. And finally, Grace's phrase, "That must be so frustrating," is a wonderful example of how to show empathy in English, acknowledging someone's feelings without trying to immediately fix the problem or offer unwanted advice. This is such an important skill in emotional conversations. Sometimes people don't want solutions. They just want to feel heard and understood. The conversation continues a little longer, with Grace mostly listening, occasionally asking gentle questions, letting Ellie process her emotions out loud. Eventually, Ellie says, "I think I just needed to say all of this out loud, you know? It's been sitting inside me for weeks." Grace smiles warmly. "I'm really glad you told me. You don't have to carry this alone." Ellie leans her head on Grace's shoulder, and there's a long, comfortable silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. Finally, Ellie whispers, "Thanks for listening. I mean it." Grace responds softly, "Always. That's what sisters are for." And with that tender, quiet moment, the conversation gently comes to an end. Here's your practice moment for this emotional conversation. I want you to think about a time when a friend or family member needed comfort, and try practicing a few gentle, empathetic phrases out loud. Phrases like, "That sounds really painful," "I'm really glad you told me," or "You don't have to carry this alone." Even if you've never said these exact words before in English, practicing them now will help your brain have them ready the next time you need to comfort someone, or even just to understand these emotions when you hear them in movies, shows, or real conversations. Now, let's shift the mood a little, moving into our fourth and final conversation for today, which is much lighter and more practical. This conversation happens between two strangers, Noah and Priya, and it takes place on a busy street corner in a new city. Noah is a tourist who is completely lost, and Priya, a local, stops to help him find his way. This kind of conversation is incredibly useful because it's exactly the type of real-life situation you might find yourself in while traveling. So pay close attention to the vocabulary here. Noah is standing on the sidewalk, holding his phone up, turning it in different directions, clearly confused about which way to go. Priya notices him and, being the friendly type, decides to stop and help. "Hey, you look a little lost. Everything okay?" Noah looks up, relieved to see a friendly face. "Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, actually, I'm trying to find the train station, but my phone map is being weird, and I have no idea where I am." Priya smiles and steps closer to look at his screen. "Oh, no worries. I know exactly where that is. You're actually not too far, just a few minutes' walk from here." Noah sighs with relief. "Oh, that's such a relief. I've been walking in circles for like 20 minutes. Priya laughs sympathetically. "Yeah, this area can be really confusing, even for locals sometimes, believe it or not." Let's pause here for a second and grab some useful travel-related vocabulary. Notice the phrase, "Oh, thank goodness," which is a natural expression of relief, used when something worrying suddenly becomes okay. Then there's walking in circles, a fantastic idiom that literally and figuratively describes going the wrong way repeatedly without making real progress. Whether you're lost on the street or stuck on a problem you can't solve. And finally, even for locals, a phrase used to emphasize that something is difficult or confusing, even for people who know the area very well, which makes the listener feel a little better about being confused themselves. Let's continue. Priya points down the street and says, "Okay, so you're going to want to go straight down this road for about 2 blocks, and then you'll see a big red building on your left. That's a bakery. You can't miss it." Noah nods, trying to remember the directions. Straight for 2 blocks. Red building on the left. Got it. Priya continues, "Right after that bakery, take a left turn, and the train station entrance is going to be right there. Maybe another minute walk after that." Noah repeats it back once more. "Okay, so straight 2 blocks, left after the red bakery, and then I'm basically there." Priya smiles. "Exactly. You got it." Noah lets out a relieved laugh. "Thank you so much. Seriously. You just saved me a ton of stress." Priya waves it off casually. "Oh, it's no big deal, honestly. I remember what it's like being new somewhere. It's overwhelming." Pause with me here again. This is a perfect example of giving and confirming directions in English. An extremely practical, high-frequency conversation type. Notice the phrase, "you can't miss it," commonly used when giving directions, meaning that something is very obvious or easy to spot. Also notice how Noah repeats the directions back. Straight 2 blocks, left after the red bakery. This is actually a fantastic listening and speaking strategy you should steal for yourself. Whenever someone gives you directions or instructions in English, repeating them back out loud, even quietly to yourself, helps confirm you understood correctly, and it's also just really good listening practice. Finally, notice Priya's casual response. "It's no big deal," a super common way to respond when someone thanks you, meaning it wasn't difficult or important. No need to thank her so much. The conversation wraps up warmly. Noah asks, "So, are you from around here originally?" Priya shakes her head. "Actually, no. I moved here about 3 years ago myself. I definitely remember feeling exactly like you looked 5 minutes ago." They both laugh, and Noah says, "Well, thanks again. Seriously. You're a lifesaver." Priya smiles. "Anytime. Enjoy the rest of your trip." As Noah walks off toward the train station, repeating the directions quietly to himself, Priya continues on her way. And just like that, a small, kind moment between two strangers comes to a natural, friendly end. Here's your final practice moment for today. I want you to imagine someone stops you on the street and asks for directions to somewhere near your home. Try giving them directions out loud in English, using phrases like, "Go straight," "Take a left," or "You can't miss it." Even if your English isn't perfect yet, this kind of imaginative practice trains your brain to access these phrases quickly, which is exactly what happens in real conversations. They move fast, and you need your vocabulary ready to go, not buried somewhere in the back of your mind. Before we move into the review, I want to give you one more conversation, because honestly, the more real English you hear today, the stronger your ear is going to get by the time you close this video. This fifth conversation takes place in a small neighborhood restaurant, and it's between a customer named Julian and a waiter named Theo. This one's a little different because it's not two friends or family members. It's a polite, semi-formal interaction between a customer and someone working in a service job. And honestly, this kind of conversation happens to almost everyone at some point, whether you're traveling or just going out to eat locally. So let's listen closely, because there's some really practical vocabulary coming up. Julian sits down at a table near the window and glances over the menu for a minute before Theo walks over with a warm, professional smile. Hey there, welcome in. Can I start you off with something to drink? Julian looks up from the menu and says, Yeah, could I just get a water for now? I'm still deciding on food. Theo nods. Of course. Still or sparkling? Julian thinks for a second. Still is fine, thanks. Theo writes it down and adds, No problem, I'll give you a few more minutes with the menu. A couple minutes later, Theo returns with the water and asks, All right, have you had a chance to decide, or do you need a bit more time? Julian says, Actually, yeah, I think I'm ready. Can I get the grilled chicken sandwich, but without the onions? I'm not really a fan. Theo nods while writing it down. Not a problem at all. Grilled chicken, hold the onions. Would you like fries, or a side salad with that? Julian responds, Fries, please. Theo confirms, Perfect, that'll be right out. Let's pause for a second here, because this conversation is full of extremely useful, real-world restaurant vocabulary. Notice how Theo says, Can I start you off with something to drink? Which is a very natural, common way waiters open a conversation. Way more common than something stiff like, What would you like to drink? Also notice the phrase still or sparkling, referring to types of water, still meaning plain, and sparkling meaning water with bubbles. This is incredibly common in restaurants, especially in cafes and nicer dining spots. Then there's Julian's phrase, I'm not really a fan, a soft, polite way of saying you don't like something without sounding rude or overly negative. And finally, notice the phrase, hold the onions, a classic restaurant expression meaning to leave out a specific ingredient. You'll hear hold the used constantly when people are customizing their food orders. The conversation continues a little further. A few minutes pass, and Theo comes back to check on Julian. How's everything tasting so far? Julian, mid-bite, gives a thumbs up and says, Really good, actually, thank you. Theo smiles. Glad to hear it. Let me know if you need anything else. Toward the end of the meal, Theo returns once more and asks, Can I get you anything else, or would you like me to bring the check? Julian says, Just the check, please, whenever you get a chance. Theo nods. No rush at all. I'll bring that right over. A minute later, Theo returns with the small folder containing the bill, sets it down gently, and says, No rush. Just let me know whenever you're ready. Julian slides his card into the folder a moment later, and when Theo returns to collect it, Julian adds, Thank you so much. Everything was great. Theo smiles warmly. I'm really glad to hear that. Have a good rest of your day. And with that friendly, professional exchange, the conversation naturally comes to a close. Pause with me here one final time for this conversation. Notice the incredibly useful phrase, whenever you get a chance, a polite way of asking for something without demanding it immediately, showing patience and courtesy. Also notice no rush, a phrase used constantly in polite English conversations to tell someone they don't need to hurry. And finally, notice how naturally both people used short, polite phrases throughout. Thank you. No problem. Glad to hear it. These tiny expressions are what make a conversation feel warm and natural rather than cold and transactional, even in a simple service setting like ordering food. Now, here's a bonus practice moment before we move to our final conversation. Imagine you're at a restaurant right now. Try ordering a meal out loud in English, using at least 3 phrases from this conversation. Maybe, could I get, hold the, or whenever you get a chance. It might feel a little silly talking to an empty room, but this kind of practice genuinely rewires your brain to access these phrases automatically the next time you're in a real restaurant, whether you're traveling abroad or just practicing your English skills locally. All right, let's move into our sixth and final conversation of today's episode. And this one brings back a little bit of humor and lightness to end things on a fun note. This conversation happens between two roommates, Isla and Owen, who are trying to plan a small get-together at their apartment for the weekend. And, as often happens between roommates, they don't quite agree on everything. Let's listen in. Isla walks into the living room where Owen is sitting on the couch and says, "Hey, so I was thinking, what if we invited a few people over Saturday night, like a small hangout?" Owen looks up from his laptop, considering the idea. "Yeah, that could be fun. How many people are we talking about?" Isla shrugs. "I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. Nothing crazy." Owen nods slowly. "Okay, that seems manageable. Should we do food or just snacks and drinks?" Isla thinks for a second. "Maybe just snacks. I don't really want to cook for that many people." Owen laughs. "Fair enough. Cooking for 7 people sounds like a nightmare, honestly." Isla laughs too. "Right? Let's just order pizza or something easy." Owen agrees. "Yeah, pizza works. Should we clean up beforehand or just, hope nobody notices the mess?" Isla rolls her eyes playfully. "Owen, we have to clean up. I'm not letting people see my room looking like a tornado went through it." Owen chuckles. "Fair point. All right, I'll handle the living room. You handle your room and the bathroom?" Isla agrees. Deal. Let's pause here for a second and grab some easy, casual vocabulary from this light-hearted conversation. Notice the phrase, "nothing crazy," which Isla uses to mean something small, simple, not overly extravagant or complicated. Then there's manageable, a really useful adjective describing something that's doable, not too difficult to handle. Also notice fair enough, a casual way of agreeing with someone, similar to "that's fair" from our earlier conversation, showing you understand and accept what the other person said. And finally, a tornado went through it, a funny, exaggerated idiom used to describe an extremely messy room. A great example of how English speakers often use humor and exaggeration in casual daily speech. The conversation continues a little further. Owen asks, "Should we tell people a specific time, or just say evening?" Isla says, "Let's just say 7. That way people have a general idea, but it's not too strict." Owen agrees. "Sounds good." "Oh, and should we ask people to bring their own drinks? Or are we providing everything?" Isla thinks for a moment. "Let's just ask everyone to bring something, drinks or snacks, whatever they want. Keeps it simple for us." Owen nods. "Smart. Less for us to worry about." Isla adds, "Also, I was thinking we could put on some music. Nothing too loud. Just something in the background." Owen smiles. "Yeah, I've got a good playlist for that, actually." Isla laughs. "Of course you do." They both share a laugh, clearly comfortable in their easy, familiar roommate dynamic, and the conversation naturally winds down as they finish sorting out the small details of their weekend plan. Pause with me one final time here. Notice the phrase, "keeps it simple," a really useful expression for describing choices that avoid unnecessary complications. Also notice, "less for us to worry about," a natural way of expressing relief about reduced responsibility or stress. And finally, notice the playful, teasing tone throughout this entire conversation. "Of course you do," said with a laugh, showing familiarity and light humor between close friends or roommates, which is such an important part of natural spoken English that often gets completely ignored in traditional English lessons. Here's your final speaking practice moment for today. Imagine you're planning a small get-together with a friend or roommate. Try having a short imaginary conversation out loud, using phrases like "nothing crazy," "fair enough," or "keeps it simple." Remember, the goal isn't perfection. It's building comfort and speed with natural English patterns. So don't worry if it feels a little awkward at first. That awkwardness fades quickly with repeated practice. All right, I know I said 6 conversations, but honestly, you all have been asking for longer, more complete listening practice videos, so let's squeeze in 2 more before we wrap up, because more practice never hurts, right? Our 7th conversation happens over the phone, between 2 close friends, Ruby and Sam, who are planning a short weekend trip together. Phone conversations are actually really different from face-to-face ones, because you can't see the other person's face or body language, so the words themselves, and the way they're said, carry even more weight. Let's listen. Ruby's phone buzzes, and she picks it up, already smiling because she can see it's Sam calling. "Hey, perfect timing. I was just about to text you." Sam laughs on the other end. "Oh yeah? What's up?" Ruby says, "So, I was looking at flights for next weekend, and honestly, they're not too bad right now. Are you still thinking about coming?" Sam pauses for a second, thinking it over. "Yeah, I really want to. I just need to check with work first, make sure I can actually get the days off." Ruby says, "Totally understandable. When do you think you'll know?" Sam replies, "Probably by tomorrow. My manager's usually pretty quick about approving stuff like that." Ruby says, "Okay, no pressure. Just let me know whenever you find out, and I'll hold off on booking until then." Sam appreciates that. "Thanks. That helps a lot, actually. I don't want you to lose a good flight deal waiting on me, though." Ruby reassures her. "Don't worry about it, seriously. I'd rather wait a day and go together than rush and have you miss out." Let's pause here for a second, because this phone conversation has some wonderfully natural phrases worth remembering. Notice how Ruby opens with perfect timing, a common expression used when something happens at exactly the right moment. Then there's "no pressure," a gentle phrase used to reduce stress on the other person, letting them know they don't need to rush their decision. Also notice "hold off on," a useful phrasal verb meaning to delay or wait before doing something, in this case, waiting before booking the flights. And finally, "miss out," a phrasal verb describing losing an opportunity to do or experience something extremely common in everyday English conversations about plans and opportunities. The conversation continues a bit further. Sam asks, "So, where exactly were you thinking we'd stay? Have you looked into that yet?" Ruby says, "Yeah, I found this really cute little place. It's got great reviews, and it's walking distance from the beach." Sam sounds excited. "Oh, that sounds perfect. How much is it roughly for the both of us?" Ruby checks quickly. "Looks like it comes out to about 80 a night if we split it, which honestly isn't bad at all for the location." Sam agrees. "Yeah, that's definitely reasonable." "Okay, I'm getting really excited now. I hope work says yes." Ruby laughs. "Same here. Fingers crossed." Sam adds, "All right, I'll text you as soon as I hear back, hopefully by tomorrow afternoon." Ruby says, "Sounds good. Talk soon." And with that light, hopeful energy, the phone call comes to a natural end. Pause with me once more here. Notice the phrase walking distance, describing something close enough to reach on foot, incredibly useful when talking about locations and travel plans. Also notice comes out to, a common way of describing a total cost after calculating it. And finally, fingers crossed, a lovely, widely used expression showing hope that something will turn out well, often paired with an actual hand gesture when speaking face-to-face, but used constantly in phone and text conversations too. Our eighth and truly final conversation for today takes place in a slightly more nervous setting, a job interview. The two people involved are Camille, the interviewer, and Felix, the candidate. Job interviews are naturally a little more formal, a little more careful in tone, but they're still completely natural spoken English, just adjusted slightly for a professional context. Let's listen closely. Camille greets Felix warmly as he walks into the small meeting room. "Hi, Felix. Thanks so much for coming in today. Please, have a seat." Felix sits down, clearly a little nervous, but trying to stay composed. "Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity." Camille smiles. "Great to hear. So, why don't we start with you telling me a little bit about your background and what drew you to apply for this role?" Felix nods, taking a small breath before answering. "Sure. So, I've been working in customer service for about 3 years now, and honestly, I've always loved problem solving, helping people figure things out. When I saw this position, especially the focus on client relations, it just felt like a really natural fit for my skills." Camille nods, clearly listening carefully. "That's great. Can you walk me through a specific example of a time you solved a difficult problem for a client?" Let's pause here for a moment, because interview English has its own particular flavor worth noticing. Notice the phrase, "have a seat," a polite, common way of inviting someone to sit down. Also, notice "drew you to," meaning what attracted or interested someone in something, a slightly more formal phrase you'll often hear in interview or professional settings. Then there's natural fit, describing something that matches well, suits someone's skills or personality. And finally, walk me through, an extremely common interview phrase asking someone to explain something step by step, in detail. Felix thinks for a moment before answering Camille's question. "Yeah, actually, there was this one situation where a client's order got delayed twice, and they were understandably pretty frustrated by the time they reached me." Camille nods, encouraging him to continue. "So, what did you do?" Felix continues. "Well, first I just let them vent a little, honestly. I think people just want to feel heard sometimes before they're ready to hear solutions. Then, once they'd calmed down a bit, I explained exactly what had happened, and I offered them a discount on their next order as an apology for the inconvenience." Camille smiles, impressed. "That's a really thoughtful approach. How did the client respond?" Felix says, "They actually ended up being really understanding about it, and they mentioned in a follow-up email that they appreciated how I handled it." Camille nods approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of patience and communication we're looking for in this role." Pause with me one final time here. Notice the phrase, "let them vent," meaning to allow someone to express frustration or complain freely before addressing the actual problem. A really valuable, emotionally intelligent phrase. Also notice "as an apology for," used to explain the reason behind a gesture meant to make up for a mistake or inconvenience. And finally, follow-up email, an extremely common phrase in professional English describing a message sent after an initial interaction, often to check in or provide additional information. The interview wraps up warmly. Camille says, "Well, Felix, that's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that example. Do you have any questions for me before we finish up?" Felix nods. "Yes, actually, I was curious what a typical day in this role usually looks like." Camille happily explains a few details, and after a few more minutes of friendly conversation, she says, "Well, it was really wonderful speaking with you today. We'll be in touch within the next week regarding next steps." Felix smiles, relieved and hopeful. "Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity." And with that professional, warm exchange, the interview conversation comes to its natural end. Here's your final practice moment connected to this conversation. Think about a strength or skill you have, and try explaining it out loud in English, using the phrase, "Walk me through a time when," followed by a short example from your own life. This kind of practice is incredibly valuable, not just for actual job interviews, but for building general confidence explaining your ideas clearly and calmly in English, under a little bit of pressure, which, let's be honest, is a skill that helps in so many areas of life, not just interviews. All right, I honestly can't help myself. Let's squeeze in just one more, a short ninth conversation, because this next situation is so common and so practical that I really don't want to leave it out. This conversation takes place at a doctor's office, between a patient named Hannah and a doctor named Dr. Whitfield. Medical conversations can feel especially intimidating in a foreign language because the vocabulary feels unfamiliar and the stakes feel a little higher. So let's break this one down carefully together. Hannah sits on the examination table, looking a little nervous, and Dr. Whitfield walks in with a warm, reassuring smile. "Hi, Hannah. Good to see you. So, what brings you in today?" Hannah explains, "Hi, I've had this really persistent headache for the past few days, and it's just not going away no matter what I try." Dr. Whitfield nods thoughtfully. "Okay, let's figure out what's going on. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the pain?" Hannah thinks for a moment. "Probably a 6 most of the time, but it gets worse in the evenings, closer to an 8. Dr. Whitfield continues, "Got it. And have you noticed anything that seems to trigger it? Stress? Certain foods? Lack of sleep? Anything like that?" Hannah nods slowly. "Actually, yeah. Now that you mention it, I've been really stressed with work lately, and I haven't been sleeping much either." Let's pause here quickly, because this conversation introduces some really important, practical medical vocabulary. Notice the phrase, "What brings you in today?" An extremely common way doctors open an appointment, way more natural than something overly formal. Also notice, "on a scale of 1 to 10, a standard phrase used to measure pain or discomfort, something you'll hear in almost every medical setting. And finally, trigger it, a useful verb describing something that causes or brings on a symptom or reaction. Dr. Whitfield continues the conversation. "Okay, that's really helpful to know. Stress and poor sleep are actually really common causes of tension headaches. So let's start there before considering anything more serious." Hannah looks relieved. "Oh, okay. That's good to hear, honestly. I was a little worried it might be something bigger. Dr. Whitfield reassures her gently. I understand that worry completely, but based on what you've described, this sounds very manageable. I'd recommend trying to improve your sleep routine, maybe reducing screen time before bed, and if the stress continues, finding small ways to manage it, even just short walks or breathing exercises, can genuinely help. Hannah nods, taking mental notes. That makes sense. I'll definitely try that. Dr. Whitfield adds, and if it doesn't improve within the next week or two, definitely come back in, and we'll look into it further, just to be safe. Hannah thanks her sincerely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you explaining everything so clearly. And with that calm, reassuring exchange, the appointment comes to a comfortable close. Pause with me one last time here. Notice the phrase, "That's good to hear," a natural way of expressing relief after receiving reassuring news. Also notice, "Come back in," a common phrase used by medical professionals inviting a patient to return for a follow-up visit if needed. And finally, notice the overall gentle, patient tone throughout this entire conversation. Doctors, at least good ones, tend to use very calm, reassuring language, and picking up on that tone is just as valuable as picking up the vocabulary itself. Here's a final quick practice moment tied to this conversation. Imagine describing a minor symptom to a doctor using the phrase "on a scale of 1 to 10," followed by a number, and then explaining what might have triggered it. Even a simple sentence like, "It's about a 4, and I think it's triggered by stress," is fantastic practice, and it's exactly the kind of real, useful sentence you might genuinely need someday if you're ever navigating a doctor's visit in English. Okay, so let's take a moment to review everything we covered today. Because repetition, as you probably already know if you've been following this channel for a while, is honestly the secret ingredient to actually remembering vocabulary long-term. You've probably heard me say this before, but I'll say it again because it's genuinely that important. Your brain doesn't learn a new word or phrase the first time it hears it. It learns it the 5th time, the 10th time, the 20th time, hearing it in slightly different situations until it finally clicks into place and becomes something you can use automatically, without translating in your head first. So don't worry at all if some of these expressions feel a little unfamiliar right now. That's completely normal. And it's exactly why I've built today's video around 6 separate conversations instead of just one. So your ear gets exposed to natural rhythm and vocabulary over and over, in different emotional tones and different everyday situations. In our first conversation, between Maya and Ben, 2 old friends reconnecting after months apart, we learned casual expressions like, "No way," used to express surprise. "Long story short," used to summarize something instead of explaining every little detail. "Impossible to work with," describing a very difficult person. "Draining," describing something exhausting, physically or emotionally. "I didn't even think twice," describing a fast, confident decision. "Make that jump," describing taking a risk or a big change. And "I feel that," a casual, modern way of agreeing with someone, or relating to what they just said. In our second conversation, set in a busy office between project manager Sophia and her team member Daniel, we picked up workplace phrases like, "Got a minute?" a casual way of asking if someone has time to talk. "What's up?" a relaxed way of asking what's going on. "Got off the phone?" describing just finishing a phone call. End of day, referring to before the workday ends. Should have, used to express regret about something not done. We're all human. A gentle way of forgiving a mistake. And that's fair. A common way of agreeing that something makes sense. In our third, more emotional conversation between sisters Grace and Ellie, late at night over tea, we learned soft, empathetic phrases like, "Talk to me," an invitation to open up, for real this time, adding emphasis and seriousness to a statement. Drifting apart, a gentle way to describe two people slowly growing distant. Just a busy phase, describing a temporary difficult period, changes the subject, describing avoidance of a topic, and that must be so frustrating. A beautiful example of showing empathy without immediately trying to fix someone's problem. In our fourth conversation, between tourist Noah and local resident Priya on a busy street corner, we picked up practical travel phrases like, "Oh, thank goodness," expressing relief, walking in circles, describing being lost or stuck without progress, even for locals, emphasizing that something is confusing for almost everyone. You can't miss it, used when giving directions, and it's no big deal, a casual response after being thanked. In our fifth conversation, at a small restaurant between customer Julian and waiter Theo, we picked up polite service phrases like, "Can I start you off with?" "Still" or "sparkling," "I'm not really a fan," "Hold the onions," "Whenever you get a chance," and "No rush." And finally, in our sixth conversation, between roommates Isla and Owen planning a small weekend get-together, we picked up light, casual phrases like "nothing crazy," "manageable," "fair enough," "a tornado went through it," "keeps it simple," and "less for us to worry about." Then, as a little bonus, in our seventh conversation over the phone between Ruby and Sam, we learned perfect timing, no pressure, hold off on, miss out, walking distance, comes out to, and fingers crossed. In our eighth conversation, the job interview between Camille and Felix, we picked up more professional expressions like "have a seat," "drew you to," "natural fit," "walk me through," "let them vent," "as an apology for," and follow-up email. And finally, in our ninth conversation, at the doctor's office between Hannah and Dr. Whitfield, we picked up practical medical phrases like, "What brings you in today?" "On a scale of 1 to 10. "Trigger it," "That's good to hear," and "come back in." That's honestly a huge amount of natural, real-world vocabulary packed into one video, 8 completely different conversations, 8 different emotional tones, 8 different everyday situations, from reunions between old friends, to tense workplace moments, to tender family conversations, to helping a lost stranger, to ordering food, to planning a party with a roommate, to a hopeful phone call about a trip, to a nerve-wracking job interview. If you understood even half of what we covered today, without needing to pause and translate, that's genuinely something to be proud of. And if you found yourself needing to rewind a few times, that's completely fine too. That's literally what this video is here for. Come back to it as many times as you need. Now, here's something really important. I want you to understand about how language learning actually works, especially at the B1 level. You don't need to memorize every single phrase perfectly right now. In fact, trying to force yourself to remember everything all at once usually backfires. It creates stress, and stress makes learning harder, not easier. Instead, What I want you to do is pick just 3 phrases from today's video. Just 3, whichever ones felt the most natural or useful to you personally, and try to use them at least once this week, in a real conversation, in a text message, or even just talking to yourself in the mirror. No judgment here. We've all done it. Language sticks best when it's connected to real use, real emotion, real context, not just passive memorization. I also want to remind you why listening practice like this matters so much, especially if your goal is real conversational fluency, not just passing a grammar test. When you listen to real, natural conversations, even scripted ones like today's, your brain starts to absorb rhythm, intonation, natural pausing, and the small connector words that native speakers use constantly but rarely get taught explicitly in traditional classrooms. Things like, you know, I mean, honestly, like. These tiny words carry so much of the natural flow of English, and the only way to really internalize them is through repeated, active listening, exactly like what we just did together. If you enjoyed this style of listening practice, and if you found it actually helpful rather than just entertaining, please give this video a like. It genuinely helps this channel grow and reach more learners just like you who are trying to build real, usable English skills. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I'm planning to make listening practice videos like this a regular thing here on English in Fluency, covering different levels, different situations, different emotions, so you'll always have fresh, natural content to train your ear with. Also, drop a comment below and tell me which conversation was your favorite today. Was it the reunion between Maya and Ben? The workplace tension between Sophia and Daniel? The emotional sister moment between Grace and Ellie? Or the helpful stranger moment between Noah and Priya? I read every single comment, and honestly, your feedback helps me plan future videos, so don't be shy. Let me know down there. One more thing before we wrap up today. I know listening practice can sometimes feel a little intimidating, especially if you're worried about understanding every single word perfectly. But here's a secret. Even native speakers don't understand every single word in every conversation they hear. Understanding the overall meaning, the emotion, the context, that's what real fluency actually looks like. Not perfect word-for-word comprehension. So be gentle with yourself during this process. Progress in listening skills happens slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you suddenly realize you understood an entire conversation without even translating it in your head first. That moment is coming for you, I promise, as long as you keep practicing consistently, exactly like you're doing right now, by watching videos like this one. I also want to talk for a second about how to actually turn a video like this one into a real habit. Because honestly, watching one listening practice video every once in a while is nice, but it's not going to transform your English on its own. What actually works is small, consistent exposure, spread out over weeks and months. So here's a simple idea for you. Try coming back to this exact video in about a week and listen to it again. But this time, don't pause as much. Just let it play naturally and see how much more you understand the second time around compared to the first. You'll probably be surprised. Then try it a third time a couple weeks after that. Maybe while you're cooking, or cleaning, or commuting, just letting the natural rhythm of these conversations settle into your ear in the background. Passive listening like that, combined with the active practice we did today, pausing, repeating, speaking out loud, that combination is honestly one of the most powerful, low-effort ways to build real listening comprehension over time. Another thing I gently encourage you to try is keeping a small notebook, physical or digital, doesn't matter, where you write down new expressions you hear, not just from my videos, but from any English content you consume, shows, podcasts, conversations with English-speaking friends. Don't just write the phrase, though. Write a tiny example sentence using it, something personal to you, something you'd actually say. This tiny extra step, connecting new vocabulary to your own life and your own voice, makes an enormous difference in how well you remember it later. I've seen this work again and again with learners who reach out to me in the comments. The ones who actively use new phrases, even just a little, always seem to progress faster than the ones who only passively watch and hope the English magically sinks in on its own. And listen, I also want to say this clearly, because I think it's easy to forget sometimes when you're deep in the process of learning a language. You are doing something genuinely impressive right now. Learning a new language as an adult, or even as a teenager, juggling it alongside work, school, family, life in general, that takes real discipline and real courage. Every single conversation you understood a little better today. Every phrase that felt slightly less foreign than it would have a few months ago, that's proof that your hard work is actually paying off, even on days when it doesn't feel that way. So take a second, right now, and just acknowledge that. You showed up today. You practiced. That matters more than you probably realize. If you want more practice like today's video, I'll leave a couple of related videos linked right at the end of this one, including one focused specifically on common phrasal verbs used in daily conversations, and another one covering natural ways to express emotions in English, which pairs really nicely with today's third conversation. Also, if there's a specific topic or situation you'd love to see turned into a listening practice conversation, tell me in the comments. Workplace English, dating conversations, family situations, travel scenarios, whatever you're curious about. I genuinely try to base future content around what you all are asking for. I also want to mention, for those of you who are curious, why I chose to focus this particular episode on B1 level content specifically. B1 is such an interesting stage in the language learning journey because it's usually the point where learners start to feel a real, noticeable gap between their reading comprehension and their listening comprehension. You might be able to read a news article and understand it perfectly fine, taking your time, maybe looking up the occasional word. But the moment someone starts speaking to you at natural speed, with natural rhythm and natural slang, that confidence can disappear pretty quickly. That gap is completely normal, and it's honestly one of the most common frustrations learners describe to me in the comments section of this channel. The good news is that gap closes with exactly the kind of practice we did today. Repeated exposure to natural spoken English, paired with active engagement rather than passive, hopeful listening. I also want to gently remind you that everyone's timeline looks different, and that's perfectly okay. Some of you watching this might have been learning English for 2 years, some for 10, Some might be returning to English after a long break and feeling a little rusty. Wherever you're starting from today, the exercises in this video work the same way, meeting you exactly where you are and helping you build from there. There's no rush, there's no race, and comparing your progress to someone else's timeline is honestly one of the fastest ways to feel discouraged unnecessarily. Focus on your own growth, week by week, video by video, conversation by conversation, and trust that consistent small efforts really do add up to something significant over time. Before I let you go, I want to leave you with one more small challenge, something you can do right after this video ends. Pick just one conversation from today, whichever one connected with you the most emotionally, and try retelling it out loud, in your own words, as if you're explaining it to a friend who wasn't there. You don't need to remember it perfectly. You don't need every detail right. Just try to capture the general story and at least 2 or 3 of the phrases we learned along the way. This simple retelling exercise is one of the most effective and most underused tools for building real spoken fluency, because it forces your brain to actively produce language, rather than just passively recognizing it. I also want to take a second to talk about consistency, because I think it's the single biggest factor separating learners who reach real fluency from learners who stay stuck at the same level for years, no matter how many videos, books, or apps they try. It's not about finding some perfect method, some secret trick nobody else knows about. It's about showing up regularly, even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired, even when a conversation feels a little too fast and a little too frustrating to follow. Every single person who speaks English fluently today, including native speakers learning a second language themselves, went through a stage exactly like the one you might be in right now, where things felt confusing, slow, and occasionally discouraging. The difference between the people who eventually break through and the people who give up isn't talent. Honestly, it's just consistency. Showing up again and again, listening again and again, speaking out loud again and again, until one day, almost without noticing, it starts to feel natural. So here's my gentle challenge to you. Beyond just watching this video once and moving on, come back to English in Fluency regularly. Whether that's once a week, twice a week, whatever realistically fits into your life, and keep building this listening muscle little by little. Combine it with real conversations whenever you can find them, whether that's language exchange partners, English-speaking friends, or even just narrating your own day out loud to yourself in English while you're cooking or walking somewhere. All of it counts. All of it adds up. And I'll be right here, making new conversations, new situations, new emotions for you to practice with every single week. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, practicing your listening, picking up some really useful natural expressions, and hopefully training your ear just a little bit more toward understanding real, everyday English. Remember, consistency beats intensity every single time when it comes to language learning. You don't need to study for hours every day. You just need to show up regularly, keep listening, keep practicing a little bit out loud, and trust the process, even on days when progress feels invisible. I'll see you in the next video, right here on English in Fluency. Until then, take care of yourself, keep practicing, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.